This morning, the owners of a gym close to where I live got arrested for defying the lockdown orders. And that's the gist of the story. They've been trying to open up in some capacity, arguing that there is a certain workaround in the wording of the law that allows them to be a members-only gym. But apparently it doesn't matter. We've heard about this gym, Atlas Gym, in the past when it became a national story. Some people who had gone there had gotten their information taken down. One guy who didn't want to be identified actually got briefly detained. I'm not sure if he was arrested. Well, now we learn that these gym owners have been arrested for trying to open their business. You want to know why this is insane? Because attached to their building is a Dollar General. It's one big building they rent out, I believe, a portion of it. Attached to it is a Dollar General. Hundreds, if not thousands of people are walking in and out of that building every single day, but they can't have a small group of people exercising. That to me it seems arbitrary. So, okay, I guess you might argue the essential services of a Dollar General it is an essential service. And so we would prefer it if the businesses were closed to prevent the spread and all that stuff. But I'll tell you what I see. I see complete hypocrisy. I see the Democrats and their allies in media completely abandoning the people and small business. They have lost touch with everything. And I can't imagine arresting these guys was necessary. Why? They could have just showed up and said, we're shutting you down. That's it. Come on out. Then they could have told them to lock up. Then that's it. Why arrest them? That's what they did. Now, that's the gist of the story. There was a woman there who said that the 33-year-old Ian Smith and 51-year-old Frank Trombetti of Williamstown are both charged with one count of fourth-degree contempt, obstruction, and violation of a Disaster Control Act, both disorderly person summons. You want to know why this is so insane and why I am absolutely blaming the Democrats for the destruction of these businesses? For several reasons. Governor Phil Murphy joins in Black Lives Matter protests in New Jersey, June 7th. It was actually a couple months ago when the whole controversy surrounding this one small gym in South Jersey erupted. And the governor himself issued a statement saying, oh, you can't do it. You can't do it. Then he went out and joined in the protests. And this is what we have seen the whole time. 30 people have died in the ongoing George Floyd riots. The mayor of Portland literally joined in, not in the actions itself, but he stood there on the federal property in front of the barricade as people were lobbing explosives at these officers who, according to the AP, many have received very severe burns and injuries. You're not hearing this because very few in media are actually reporting it. The Democrats are willfully engaging in psychotic behavior that is destroying the lives of regular people. I bring you now to the story from Michael Tracy. And I disagree with Michael on some issues, but this is the bigger picture. Now, I know we heard about the arrests. The two guys at the gym were released, but I want to show you this because Michael Tracy documents the destruction that small businesses across this country have faced and how the people in the media in fear of helping Donald Trump get elected are ignoring this. Instead, what do we get? The Democrats deflecting, supporting, or downright joining in the protests themselves and riots that have resulted in the destruction of so many businesses, ordering the arrest of small businesses who say we need to reopen. This is what you get. Michael Tracy writes, 2 months since the riots and still no national conversation. In this story, I want to jump straight to it. I want to catch your interest on this one. I want to show you the true nightmare that is the far left riots with a couple of photos. Michael Tracy posts some images throughout this throughout his story, but the most nightmarish are these two. Please don't hurt us, sprayed on the door. Please don't hurt us. We support BLM. Written in spray paint on one of the boarded up windows. This is the future you will get if things keep moving in this direction. Because the Democratic Party is either acting like the riots aren't real, they've actively supported them and marched along with them. Now, I understand there's a difference between peaceful protest and violent riot, but the riots have absolutely overtaken everything. That's why they are saying we support Black Lives Matter. Because it's not the police that are going around destroying their property. It's not the police that are terrorizing these people every single day. And it's not the police that are oppressing these people. It's Black Lives Matter. Now, don't get me wrong. Cops came out and arrested these two gym owners, so I'm not here to cut them slack either. They are enforcing, as far as I can tell, unconstitutional edict from a governor. Sure, there will be lawsuits, but these cops who came and took the guns from the McCloskeys in violation of state law, all of these cops need to be held accountable too. But guess what? In the midst of the coronavirus stuff, the lockdowns and the cops who are shutting these businesses down, issuing fines, are not coming out and beating people and smashing windows and destroying everything, though they are enforcing what the Democrats want them to do in these cities. So again, they deserve no special positioning here. Michael Tracy writes, "We are now approaching the 2-month mark since the riots that erupted across the U.S. in late May and early June. There's a reasonable argument to be made that these riots were unprecedented in U.S. history, or at the very least since the 60s. Yet if one surveyed the national media today, you'd barely even know anything happened. Nor would you likely be aware that those who bore the brunt of the destruction, largely minorities whose sensibilities don't fit into any neatly delineated ideological category, are still acutely suffering from the fallout." Now, I want to point something out. Michael Tracy very much frames this as one of the biggest media scandals in the country, maybe for our generation. I don't know necessarily how he quantifies it, but it is a major media scandal. However, he points out that journalists and pundits are scared that Trump will get reelected if they highlight what's going on. To me, that sounds like, as I've often argued, the Democrats and the journalists overlap almost entirely. I'm not kidding. They overlap to a great degree. These journalists want Democrats to win. They're actively supporting them. Not every single media outlet, mind you, but many of the mainstream, prominent, long-standing or venture capital funded outlets seem to be more like Democratic promotional campaign, publishers than journalists. Michael writes, "Civil unrest has, of course, occurred before, but the riots of 2020 exhibited features that belie any easily historical parallel. For one thing, consider their enormous geographical scope. While the most extreme riots in cities like New York, Chicago, Philly, and particularly Minneapolis did receive considerable attention, however fleeting, incomplete, and unnecessarily inflected with knee-jerk partisanship, there were also smaller-scale riots in surprisingly far-flung places that you hardly would have known about unless you lived in the area, happened to visit, or intentionally sought out what remains of the bare bones local media coverage. To take just a small sampling, Atlantic City, New Jersey, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Olympia, Washington all underwent significant riots, at least per the normal expectations of life in these relatively low-key cities. Did you hear anything about them? Because I hadn't. And I'm abnormally attuned to daily media coverage only because I personally visited did I learn of the damage." I want to give a shout out, man, to Michael Tracy. This is excellent, excellent work. And while I may disagree with him on his assessment, I think you can read it. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. I'm going to show certain key points and I'm going to give you my opinion on, but absolutely check out the stuff he's writing. I want to show you a bit more. We're going to come back to this because he makes some very important points. 3 points initially. Check this out. Seattle business owners feel abandoned by the city they once loved. Here, this is the Atlas Gym. Here's one. What are they waiting for? Owners of riot-damaged businesses lament aid delays. And how about this? Downtown Portland businesses derailed by the pandemic say protests present a new challenge. These businesses have been completely abandoned by the media and by Democratic leadership. And to make things worse, they literally arrest those who try to survive after the fact. They're giving, figuratively, no quarter to anyone. Where's the aid? Gone. They allowed the Chaz. They took the police away in Seattle. The police couldn't go out and use riot control measures. So a group of 150 went around smashing up all the windows in businesses. We're working on a card game right now. I'm going to let you in on a secret. I got to do this. We're working on a card game called Cancel Culture. I'm working with a few people, and I'm working with the dude from Freedom Tunes, Seamus, you might know him. And one of the jokes we recently came up with is that we're going to have a card called Small Business Owner, and it's going to be labeled as a far-right personality. The joke being that the Democrats won't support these individuals, and that people who try to argue for protecting their businesses, the people who try to say we need the help of the police, are called fringe far-right or are ignored entirely. That's the joke, because this is what we see all the time. Let me highlight some of what Michael Tracy says here. He noticed a few points. Let me read this. He says, "I'm not a rocket scientist, and it doesn't take some kind of profound journalistic acuity to walk around riot-affected areas. talk to citizens, record their stories and impressions, take some photos and record some video, and compose some tweets. And yet, I heard from hundreds of people across the United States and world who were shocked that they'd never been aware of what happened in Minneapolis, St. Paul, if not for my dinky little Twitter thread. When I visited a month after the peak of the riots, much of this major American metropolis still lied in ruins. Not that normal life hadn't mostly resumed, it had. But it's resumed in a way that war-torn areas configure some ad hoc routine that enables the resumption of semi-normal activity amidst the rubble and despair. In speaking with locals, many of whom have lost their livelihoods or had to plead for their children not to be burned alive, it often seems like the extent of the ruination they've experienced was barely ever appreciated in the first place. There are several potential explanations why. This is a very important point that I want to interject here in what Michael is saying. He mentions the media's fixation. Journalists and editors. Let me read. The media, in its characteristic insularity and myopia, has instead chosen to pathologically fixate on a constant stream of culture war inanities that stem loosely from this ongoing movement, such as the propriety of various statues and monuments, whether various food brands and sports teams are racist, and whether various micro-celebrities need to be canceled for some imagined transgression. They are also beset by various hyper-moralizing staff revolts within their own elite institutions, leading them to adopt an inordinately inward editorial disposition on account of their own neurotic personal issues. That's an epic paragraph, dude. Under these narcissistic conditions, real-world human suffering becomes less of a pressing concern. I gotta hand it to him, he's right. I have seen way too many articles from news outlets writing about themselves. I kid you not, staff revolt. We must write about ourselves and other journalists. They've become drama engines. And they're ignoring the plight of actual small business owners and the American people. The media and the Democrats, in my opinion, have absolutely abandoned regular working people in favor of some fringe, narcissistic, intersectional psychosis. They have put on blinders. They are supporting Antifa or pretending like they don't exist. To me, it's insane. He says, 2, journalists, editors, and pundits believe, either consciously or subconsciously, probably some half-scandalous combination of the two, that highlighting the harmful after effects of these historic nationwide riots would somehow redound to the political benefit of Trump. Redound, which to them would be the most disastrous outcome of all. This probably isn't even correct. Trump is currently seizing every opportunity to shoot himself in the foot all on his own. But the media class is nonetheless mortified to even contemplate the possibility that anything they might do could conceivably help him. And that's it right there. While Michael Tracy takes particular aim at journalism, you have to point out, as I have in other segments, when I say Democrats and their allies, journalists are actively trying to help the Democrats win, and they are suppressing information they believe will actually help Trump win. And they're now discovering it. But I'm going to say that for the next segment. He says, these same media class members are themselves deeply invested in what they regard as the movement, however diffuse and ill-defined this movement may be, and they are extremely reluctant to produce any coverage which might reflect poorly on said movement and potentially undermine its moral and political legitimacy. And there it is. You know, someone once said that politics is downstream from culture. I believe it was Andrew Breitbart, probably was. Correct me if I'm wrong. And this is what we're seeing. Perhaps it's not that the journalists themselves are Democrats. It's that journalists are invested in the movement, as Michael Tracy says. And the Democrats then just chase after whatever narrative emerges from left-wing media. Thus, they begin to support fringe ideological movements instead of working class people. Businesses get destroyed. And what do we see? The Democratic mayor of New Jersey literally arrests 2 guys. And shame on the police. I'll say that too. Talk about police reform. Police should not be enforcing unconstitutional edict. Michael says, I don't claim to have a complete answer for what explains this dynamic. What I can do is simply share some of my observations and encounters. Then you can decide for yourself whether there's been a conspicuous paucity of coverage and if, say, a national conversation is warranted. Numerous establishments were boarded up in Atlantic City in June. Just off the boardwalk, an Arab grocery store owner told me about how his storefront window was smashed by a rioter wielding a baseball bat as he was working. The riots came just as much of the city was preparing to partially reopen from COVID for the summer beach season. So what do you think? What do you think when you see Democrats joining in all of these protests? I'm not talking about the violent riots. I'm saying how many Democratic leaders in New York, in Michigan, in New Jersey, in Philadelphia marched with the protests? And now, after they gave all this support and the riots got just so much worse, they have to put up signs in their windows saying, please don't hurt us. We support Black Lives Matter. This is what we're seeing from Michael Tracy. One of the small Somali grocer's neighbors is a Mexican convenience store owner. He said looters broke in and stole a significant amount of items. Here are the safety precautions he took. They marched with these people. They marched with Black Lives Matter. And then the business owners had no choice but to beg Black Lives Matter rioters to spare them. What do you think people are going to be talking about when they say it was this group of protesters? And what do you think is going to happen come November when they say that's the guy who marched with them? You think they're going to vote for him? Maybe they will. Maybe I'm wrong. I can't look at this. I see all these stories about businesses, and I just can't believe regular people are thinking to themselves, I'm glad the Democrats are supporting this when my business has been destroyed. I'm glad that I'm not allowed to reopen my gym, but people can go march to the streets and the Democratic politicians join them. I'm glad it's happening. I don't buy it. I'm sorry. I don't. I see video after video and I see stories like this. These are the real world consequences of what these riots have produced. And you mean to tell me, outside of the polls, outside of the rhetoric, outside of the journalism, that when we look at these photos, we're supposed to assume these people are going to go and vote for Joe Biden? I don't buy it. Donald Trump is talking about sending in federal law enforcement to help people. I don't buy it. We can see there's a really sad story that Michael has in here. This story right here. Look at this. The shell of what was once an auto repair shop operated by an Ethiopian man still sits burned out and destroyed, leaving the man out of work potentially for months. He said, the man, who like many others did not want to conduct a formal interview, remarked that he now has nothing to do all day. His tools and equipment were destroyed. This story broke my heart. An Ethiopian man, I'm assuming that means he is an immigrant, had his tools destroyed? You destroyed his tools? It looks like they burned his building. Why? Why would they do this? These people are horrific. And then in the media, what do they say? The language of the unheard. Now you're listening, right? Was it worth it for the white progressive liberals or whatever who live in the hoity-toity suburbs who don't experience this to destroy the business of an immigrant and destroy his tools so he could literally not recover? You have salted the earth of his business, you disgusting monsters. Look, I get it. They rampaged through the town if they tore up a garden, but to return and salt the earth so that nothing could ever grow again is the most psychotic and disturbed BS I've ever seen. I'm sorry, man. I read this story from Michael Tracy. It is amazing work, and I am furious at what I am reading about what they have done to regular people. And I am furious at the Democrats who have marched alongside many of these people. And then they go and arrest gym owners. This is what I have to read all day, and I am sick of it. I am absolutely sick of it. This story really, really breaks my heart. He has no reason. He has no reason to spray paint on his windows. Please don't hurt me. Why? Because they have salted the earth of his business to make sure it never comes back. And they say, so what? They have insurance. No, they don't. These people are sick, twisted, disgusting monsters. And I am sick and tired of people defending them and the media defending them. It's what they do. They've been doing it all day, every day, nonstop for months. I want you to explain to this man why his life didn't matter, why his business didn't matter, and why now he has to suffer. I want you to explain to the people who have to put up signs, big black spray paint saying their business is black owned, to protect themselves from the violent rioters who seek to destroy everything you know and hold dear, what you've built. The building where you serve food, where you find your passion, where you employ your neighbors, your friends, your family, your community. You have to beg them every day, please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt us. Like they're doing now in Portland and Seattle, and like they've been doing in Berkeley. And after reading all of this, I'm supposed to believe these people are saying to themselves, the Democrats are the right choice. I can't believe it. I just absolutely can't believe it. Unless, of course, it's true. The media has done everything in their power to embolden, embrace, and protect this. And that's why I detest these people in media, as I'm sure most of you do. I am sick of the fake news. I am sick of the lies. And I am eternally grateful that someone like Michael Tracy, though I may disagree on some of his assessments, he's gone out and shown what these people are experiencing. I've long suspected many of the same things he has, though he's very critical of what he says are low IQ right-wing people who, care more about complaining about the violence of Antifa than to actually show the victims. I disagree with this. I believe if you show this story to the right, they will be as outraged as I am. I can't believe they destroyed the tools of this man and he has nothing left. Salting the earth of his business, destroying businesses, they will never come back. It's insane to me. Now, I want to read you this. Here's an account from a young man, Matthew, who took part in the riot at the 3rd Police Precinct, which was the ground zero for rioting in Minneapolis. Among other observations, he remarks that those who carried out the arson attacks were exclusively white, at least according to his own firsthand observations. And at certain points, says he witnessed non-white business owners warding off white rioters. Here's an anarchist A scrawled on the burned out shell of a liquor store across the street from the police precinct. Yeah. Michael Tracy mentions, many of these people aren't necessarily going to go and vote conservative or anything like this. Many of the businesses are outright gone. Many of the locals, they're not just going to say, Donald Trump is the right answer. In fact, many of them view Donald Trump rather negatively. But what I'm going to tell you right now is that it's not necessarily about Donald Trump for a lot of these people. It's about their mayors. It's about their governors. It's about the local politicians. It's about the people who marched side by side with these people after all of this was going on. I'm angry, man. I'll tell you what. I think the establishment Republicans are complete trash. I do not like most of them. There's only a small handful. I absolutely do not like the establishment Democrats, but I will tell you one thing. Donald Trump has said, stop the rioting. The left has argued he's made it worse. If Antifa shows up to a courthouse in Portland and throws explosives and starts fires, they have initiated the conflict, and I will not blame U.S. Marshals for that. If they then get angry that the Marshals seek to defend that property, I'm not going to blame them for acting in defense of their courthouse. You want to protest, fine, but those people throwing explosives are not protesting. They are the same who would do this. In Seattle, just a week or so ago, 150 people went around smashing windows, looting, not stealing for themselves, not because they need this. No, they didn't need bread like AOC might say about New York. They burned the merchandise in the street. And I have been to Berkeley, and I have seen in the Bay Area the signs in the window saying, please spare our store. Please do not hurt us. I have seen those signs myself. I have seen the storefronts putting up all of the protest material, claiming they're owned by minorities, begging them to please not hurt us. And I will not stand for that kind of society. And I will absolutely say it's time for law and order. So what do you think's going to happen when someone like me, former or a disaffected, I'll just say disaffected urban liberal skateboarding youth, grew up punk rock, am now watching innocent people have their businesses ransacked and destroyed across this country in small towns? I'm furious. I got another segment coming up that is an extension of this. You see, the Democrats have finally started realizing that the violence and the destruction is bad news. And now they're trying to flip the narrative, and I'm going to continue my outrage in the next segment coming up at 4 p.m. over at timcast.net. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you there.